Hello everybody, my name is Gail Hugman and I am Lessons Alive. I run a teaching service for children and parents, which I have got on the directory of Laurel Leaf Networking, and this live, Facebook Live is my first Facebook Live, and hi Laurel. This is my first Facebook Live, and so thank you very much to Laurel Leaf Networking for this facility. I hope that a few people will join us today because I'm talking about motivation. Oh, great. I'm glad you can hear me. I worked in schools for almost 30 years before deciding that I wanted to do something about the motivation of children. I had asked a young senior teacher what they found most difficult in teaching, and he thought about it for a moment and then said motivation. He said, I can make children do what I want them to do, but I can't make them want to do it. And this was at the core of his work with Year 6 at the time. Now, motivation is something that is very core to children's learning, because unless a child is motivated, well motivated, then they will be going through the motions. I set up Lessons Alive to try and get to the core of what it is that motivates children. And I could say to you now, there are 6 main things I've come across since working privately. 1, they don't get school. They don't actually get what school is for. 2, they have a negative attitude. They may have a negative attitude about school. 3, they can't concentrate. 4, it may be their listening skills are weak. 5, they have an undiagnosed learning issue or processing issue. And 6, they're too busy inside to really be able to grasp the situation that they're in. Now, that's a surface level. I wanted to go deeper, because you can find programs out there that tell you how to make a child concentrate. You can find programs out there that will help you with listening. You can find programs out there that will help you with concentration. But what is at the core of all this motivation? And I went to an exhibition in 2003 or 4, an education exhibition selling resources. And I was walking around looking at all these marvellous programs, online programs, offline programs, all these resources that are available for you to use to develop handwriting, to develop listening, to develop concentration. But I felt there was something missing. And I came back from this exhibition feeling quite frustrated about what it was that was missing. I used to work, as I say, in schools. I've had a range of abilities in my class, and since working in Lessons Alive, I've managed to get to the core, I feel, on several issues, and that's what I want to talk about today. I want to take you back first to the time before you were born. And I do this with children sometimes. I want you to think back to the time before you were born, to the time when you were created. You were created unique. You have a mission, you have a purpose, and you have a sense of self that has an agenda when you arrive. And that agenda involves development. It involves growth. It involves having a contribution to make because there is something unique in you. And when I look at a child, I look at the most intelligent, the most creative, the most sensitive form of life on earth, an example of that. And I would sometimes say to the children, you are one example of the most creative, the most sensitive, the most intelligent form of life on this planet. So why are you behaving like that? The thing is, when you arrive, you know nothing. You know absolutely nothing. You don't know what day it is. You don't know where you are. You don't know who all these people are making a noise around you. And you have no idea about the environment into which you've been born. So the first 5 years, you have this incredibly powerful bond with your mum, if you're fortunate. And we know, I'm not going to deal with it today, but we know that if that bond is severed for some reason, all sorts of difficulties can ensue. But as I say, I'm dealing in a more general way today. You have this bond and you grow and develop quite happily, and your mum begins to give you, or your dad begins to give you, reference to do with the place you're in. You know, when children go to school, they feel they have to take in all this stuff, all this new stuff from the world outside. But actually, most of it is already in them. What do I mean by that? If I hold up a letter and I say, this letter says ah, a child will think this is something new that they have to add to themselves. But actually, I tell all the children I meet, and this especially will help children with low self-esteem or low confidence, by the time you're 6 months old, you have made every sound you need to make to speak any language in the world. And next time you're with a baby, listen out, because that's the process that's going on. And they are practicing the sounds that are inbuilt when we arrive to be able to communicate. It's marvellous, marvellous technology. And gradually, they begin to hone it to their mother language. Now, by the time a child is 5 years old, it needs to have established a first language. Because during that period of time, neural pathways are being created like fury. Because at the point of birth, 2/3 of the brain is unprogrammed. It's fantastic. And this, the children need to know. 2/3 of the brain is yours to develop, yours to grow, yours to program. The 1/3 is programmed before birth with all that the body needs to be maintained and to serve its purpose on earth. It's quite fabulous. And I talk to the children about these things because they need to know that they haven't got to wait to grow up to be able to do something. Their job is to grow as much as possible their reference, their knowledge, their skills, because they have a purpose here on earth. Now, I'm not a religious person, particularly. I'm not a political person. I just think that when a child, each individual life has such potential, and it has no idea about the culture here when it arrives. So when a child says, it's not fair, they are referring to the culture, not to life. And when we separate life and the culture, the children begin to see that life is something special And the culture is a playground in which to choose our development. So, I can see things coming up on screen, and I'm sorry I'm not addressing you. I'm just getting into my flow here. So, so when a child goes to school, they need to know that school is where they can go and find the knowledge and the skills and the tools that will help them participate in their life on earth. It is not the be-all and end-all of life. And when a child realises that school is something they use to develop themselves, you will see a different attitude, and you will see that they begin to grow in confidence and grow their self-esteem. Because when they just go to school and feel there's competition, there's judgment, there's self-doubt, there's criticism, they don't know how to manage these things. So that's my first thing about school. They don't get school. And so they will often not get the fact that actually it's the teacher's job to teach, but it's their job to learn. And if they have difficulty with their job, then they have either a teacher they can ask, or if they're not comfortable, they have a mum or dad they can ask for help. I also ran a workshop at one point called What is a Parent and What is it For? And maybe one day we can go through that one, because it puts a different perspective on the energies at play and the difficulties that parents run into. So the first thing to help a child understand is how to use school. The negative attitude. A negative attitude will develop when a child often feels they don't count, or they've got to wait until they grow up before they can do anything. And often in my dealings with parents, they'll say to me, I can't get them to do their homework, or I can't get them to do this. And we're talking about a year 5 person. And great frustration for everybody. And the child is full of resentment. Now, there can be many reasons for this, and obviously in half an hour, this is a very general overview. I track back through a child's history when I meet them to find out what the influences are on this young, creative, intelligent, sensitive being that have interrupted the natural line of development, because there you will find the difficulty. And sometimes when I've been talking to a new client, they will say, well, no, there's nothing in my history that would cause this child to feel this way. And then they'll say, does postnatal depression count? And then somebody else will come in, or the father might say, the fact that we moved house, does that count? And gradually we go through all the major stresses that child has encountered. Now, of course, every parent wants to protect their child from any turbulence of moving, go and play with your things, of mum not being well, nanny will look after you, or somebody, go to grandma or somebody. But the thing is, the child is dealing with a parent who's distressed, and they process that because children are little processors. And that between birth and puberty, what they process is feeling. They don't have reference. They don't know what to think. They don't know how to understand it. So when parents say to me, well, this was happening, maybe they were having a lot of arguments or something. They said, but we kept it from the children. No, you didn't. The children feel it. Now, it's fine. People argue. But they need to know that they weren't the cause of it. Or they need to know exactly what the processes are that are going on so that they can interpret the feeling and settle that query before they can concentrate at school, for example. So negative attitudes can come from not having responsibility, not being helped to become independent. At the age of 7, children will change, often change. Parents will say, used to be really bubbly, went off to school, was really happy, and then we got to year 3 and he started bullying people and I don't know what to do. Or he's become really withdrawn and I don't know what to do. Now at 7, there is a natural development process that's occurring. And it's to do with their line of development that would occur whether school was involved or not. And it's the point where a child begins to realise that, hey, I'm a person in the world. I'm not part of my mother. I'm a person in my own right. And they will either gain in confidence and start showing their ability and can become quite challenging, or they may withdraw. It is also the stage where most of the physical side of a child has reached a certain maturity where you can say that any difficulties that have been showing, you can say, has this child got a specific learning need? Should we get this child assessed? Before that time, there's too many immature things that are still ongoing in the natural, in the core of that life. I'm waving my hands about a lot, aren't I? So, where have we got to? We're talking about motivation. You need to go deep. You need to say, when a child is asked to listen, do they know what that means? They only know if they have gone through a process explaining the difference between listening and hearing. I've got a whole course that I'm putting together for parents in how to teach children to listen. And there's so much interference in the world. I don't know how many of you may have watched I'm pleased, Joanna. I don't know how many people will have watched The Doctor Who Gave Up Drugs recently. Not that he gave up drugs, but as a doctor. And he was dealing with children with ADHD. It was fascinating. Because what was happening was they were giving these children time. Now, I work with high achievers, I work with every strata of society. Household names to single mothers in difficulty sometimes. I don't know who's on the end of the phone when I pick it up. And so if they ask me to come, I go to work with their children. And across the board, every child is built the same at core. Every brain works the same at core. Every brain is 1/3 programmed, and every brain needs reference and needs to understand the processes involved so that they can access school. With listening, it's not just hearing. I asked a child once, what do you do when you listen? He said, I know. And then he looked at his brother and giggled. He hadn't got a clue. What do you do in the brain when you listen? So you need to engage children at this level. They will listen to you if you talk to the core. If you're just telling them, you must do this, you must do that, they don't know why, and the core will resist you. They have an agenda of their own. And every parent has this overwhelming desire to protect their child. Of course you do. However, every child has this overwhelming desire to get out into that playground and do stuff. And so there's conflict can arise because you know the dangers of the cultures we're in. They don't. That's what innocence is all about. Innocence is not knowing the contradictions, the danger, the judgment, all of these things you're well familiar with, and so am I, which is why I'm nervous talking to you. But you need to go deep. If you want to understand a child, you need to go deep, and you need to sit alongside them and have what I call, I can't remember what I call it, a mummy moment, where it's you and that child alone on the planet, and you are two lives meeting. And I have these moments when I'm working with children and they get something. And I've actually put into a book some of those moments, and the book is available, 100 Things to Learn Before You're 10. This wasn't to be necessarily an advert for it, but I was trying to communicate it to parents that we cannot go on just telling children to learn and getting them to go through the motions when they're separating out the core of themselves, keeping them protected, keeping that inside, and performing on the outside, developing a role, because that's where I believe they get into conflict in teenage years, and we know that teenagers can run into all sorts of difficulty with drugs and goodness knows what else, if they don't have a strong enough core, if they don't have a strong enough belief in their purpose. And that's why I do what I do, and why I don't call myself a tutor. So, hi Vanessa. So these issues, undiagnosed learning difficulty is a big one for children who have one. And it's because the culture the culture judges them as not so good, which is such a huge mistake. Because, excuse me while I have a sip of water, because any difference in the way a child is wired is a talent or a gift to be developed. They may not fit too readily into the school system, and there are basics that they need to learn, like reading, writing and so on, and all the special needs help is designed to help them manage that side of life. But don't dismiss the wonderful gift that they bring. Whenever I'm working with children who have special needs, I will focus on their strengths. I will teach them strategies to manage the difficulty. So of course I look at alphabets and phonics and all the usual traditional things. But I want to get inside, what is their talent? Where is their strength? Because that is the strength that they bring to the world, and that is the contribution that they have to make. And so I think if you can manage the negative, manage the weak areas, and then build on the strengths. You know, I met a little boy who was 5 when I met him. He's quite old now. So obviously I've been doing this a while. I met him at 5, and he would doodle the whole time. He would doodle. He was lost in his class of 30. He was very shy, painfully withdrawn, and every time I saw him, he would doodle. And I worked with him for a few terms weekly, because his parents were dealing with particular things. And then they made decisions about him and where he was going to go to school and so on. And I continued with the family fortnightly, monthly. And as this child grew, I would take books each time to encourage his artwork, which was getting better and better and better. And then he won a scholarship at 11 plus. He won a scholarship for art. And then he went on through school, and he's now doing some course at college with art. And all of that was a little talent that we spotted when he was 5. And you take these little bits and make them important to the children. You know, great footballers start kicking a ball around when they're able to walk and then become fabulous footballers, but it takes hours and hours. And Malcolm Gladwell is quite right when he says 10,000 hours. I tried to work out how many hours I've been teaching, but 44 years is a long time in hours. So I think wait until they're 7 if you want them diagnosed for special needs. Don't panic if there is a special need. Look at the strengths. There are materials to help you. There are people to help you. Focus on the core whenever you're trying to help a child. You need to get past that brain. Now, I have a copy here. My book has a lot of the lessons that have been come to, some of those magic moments for you to be able to use with your children. And I'm always here at the end of the phone. Well, I'm not always here. Sometimes I'm teaching. But I'm here if you want to talk. You know, I say to people, you pay for my teaching, but you know, I'll have a coffee with you. I will come and help you with issues that you're having with your children. But you pay me to teach them. So if you want my input. But I don't know. I hope this has been helpful. It's such a huge subject. But the best I can say to you in half an hour, it's almost half an hour, they don't get school. Don't talk to them as though this is a wonderful place. You know, if you say to a child, it's going to be really fun, what if it's not? What if they're frightened? What if they just don't get it? I was in a home once and a girl was being bullied. And I said to her, well, if it's so difficult, you need to talk to your mum. And she said, but my mum's busy, she works. At which point her mother almost pole vaulted over the kitchen counter and said, I'd always be there for you. They don't know that. They don't know that. They don't realise how you feel because they don't feel that. You are there to protect. They are there to grow and develop. So look at your child in that way if you can. And if you would, I was going to read you my story of Little Hum. It's recorded and it is on my blog, on my website, lessonsalive.com. And it is a lovely little story. It came after the education exhibition that I went to, and I thought there's something missing, there's something children need to know, there's something more. And that something more is a recognition that a human being, a human life, a little human life, intuitively knows it's a very special thing. It intuitively knows it's meant to grow, develop, and get character. And we've got about 100 years to do it, I hope. We've got about 100 years to do it before we go home or wherever we go. But please, go to the core when you're dealing with your children. Have those mummy moments. Have those special times when you can say, what is it you're struggling with and how can I help? Because they come with their own agenda. I hope this has been helpful. Please, if you would like me to do another one sometime on a different topic, you know, I'm wonderful on reading and comprehension. I really love those. And I'm happy to talk about concentration specifically or listening, but I need to know from you. I didn't have any specific questions today, and if any have been asked, I'm afraid they've gone past because I'm trying to do the whole thing in half an hour. So it's been great. Thank you very much for coming along. Any questions that you have, let me know, and I'll see you around. Good luck with your children. Bye.